Right. So welcome to you all from wherever you may be in the world. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Sechelt First Nation, where I observe and where I live, and grateful to them for their care of this land. And if you aren't aware of what First Nations people are in your neighborhood, I encourage you to check that out because it's worth looking into. All right, so what I want to do today is talk about eyes in the sky. You're looking up at the sky, there's eyes looking back at you. No, I'm not talking about aliens. If actually you're thinking of one of my favorite shows on YouTube, Space Time by Dr. Matt Dowd. His favorite expression is never aliens. And then we could do a show on SETI and the WOW signal, which is nearly 50 years old now, and exoplanets and stuff. That'd be a great show to do. But what we're talking about this time is the World Asteroisms Project and how thousands of years have gone by and people have been looking at the sky, and one of the things that they see up there is eyes looking back at them, or faces. And what I want to start with, just in case you're new to this, asterisms, what we're talking about is a group of stars or a star that have been identified and named. And our scorecard, we are now just a few days away from the second anniversary of the World Asterisms Project. And a year ago, when we did the official launch, we had 8,444 asterisms and 450 telescopic asterisms, and we thought we were doing really good. As of yesterday, it's 12,399, including 2,623 telescopic asterisms, is already out of date because I've got a list that I was working on this morning. So, and how do people find them in the first place? Thought I'd give you an example. Here's a piece of sky that I happen to be looking at. We're looking between Orion and Taurus here. And right there, if you zoom in, there is a group of stars, which is on Jeffrey Corder's list of asterisms, which is mostly, this is a possible open cluster. That's the way a lot of these observing lists are. And he's got a huge list, and I'm looking at it, and immediately this pops out at me. There's an eye, and there's a tear. And I'm not sure whether this is weeping or laughing so hard that it's weeping, and I think it's probably the latter because it's so happy I found it in the sky. At least I'd like to think that that's the case. So there's a lot of stars out there that are identified as eyes, and I am not going to even attempt to tell you about them all because there's just too many. We'll get to where you can get to the World Asterisms Project and explore for yourself in a moment, but I'll give you 3 examples, and this one here is one of them. This is the star Mira, Omicron Ceti, and the Hawaiians call this the eye drawn downwards. The Pleiades all over the world has so many names I could do like several episodes on just names of the Pleiades, but a lot of people identify it as eyes all over Polynesia. This is the Maori, this is the Rapa Nui, this is the Hawaiians, and so on. Call it the chief's eyes. The Koreans call it the ear and eye sky. And there is a Western name for this, the hairy eyebrow. So definitely a lot of people. This one is from ancient Norse skies. Pretty easy to find Castor and Pollux in the sky. They're prominent stars. They're called Thiazi's eyes, and this relates to Asatru mythology. And basically, Thiazi is the son of a giant, and he starts messing around with a certain goddess, and Odin gets very upset, and it's not a good idea to get Odin upset. Odin takes Thiazi's eyes, rips them out, and throws them into the sky. So, if you're Icelandic or you're Saxon, Thiazi's eyes. So let's start with some of these objects. This is the Black Eye Galaxy, Messier 64 and Coma Berenice. And it was first discovered not by Charles Messier, but by English astronomer Edward Pigott in 1779. It's also known as the Evil Eye, the Sleeping Beauty. And you can easily see how somebody could get that impression because it's got these very prominent dust lanes involved. Now, these people I've mentioned so far have nothing to do with the name of the thing. It has to do with these two. Sir William Herschel, the English astronomer, was looking at this object with his telescope in 1790, and with him was a famous physician, Sir Charles Blagden, fellow of the Royal Society. And Blagden looked in the eyepiece and he described what he saw, and Herschel wrote it down. Contains one lucid spot like a star with a small black arch under it, so that it gives one the idea of what is called a black eye arising from fighting. And from that point on, this has been known as the Black Eye Galaxy. That's how these things happen. If you're wondering exactly where that is, there's that triangle, which is Coma Berenice, and it's located just about there. And that line between, down that side of the triangle. Now there's another black eye. This is NGC 5248. It's called Well 45 on Sir Patrick Moore's catalog. It's in the constellation Boötes. This was observed by William Herschel in 1785, but the person who named this was American astronomer Brian Skiff. This is in 1993, who in his observing manual said it's a dark patch in the arms to the south of the center, making it look like a black eye. And if you're looking for that one, here we are between Boötes. You can see Arcturus at the top there and Virgo, and it's right in between, right about there. There's also a black eye nebula. This is NGC 1999 in Orion. This is another one that William Herschel discovered, 1790. It's also known as a rubber stamp. You can easily see why it's called that. The 13th pearl, and it's also called Africa. And that last one came from American astronomer Paul Alsing at the McDonald Observatory down in Texas, who wrote, many observers said it looked like Africa. I haven't figured out who these other observers yet are and whether they got the name before he did, but this, if you're looking for it, there's the sword of Orion, and just below the sword, that's where you're going to find it. Now there's the Colossal Cosmic Eye. This is NG 1350 in Fornax. This was discovered by Scottish astronomer James Dunlop in 1828, observing from South Africa. And it is a wonderful object to take in. If you look at Eridanus, the river, which is winding all the way across the screen here, you can see Fornax is tucked into the corner of the loop there. It's in between those two right there. Now, there is a pair of galaxies, NGC 4435 and 4438 in Virgo, which are called the Eyes. William Herschel spotted these in 1784, but they were named by Scottish astronomer Ralph Copeland. And Copeland specifically identified these as looking at eyes. They're also known as the Markarian's eyes because it's part of Markarian's chain. So if you go looking for Markarian's chain, which is located right here in between Leo, Coma Berenice, and Virgo, you'll find the eyes. This is the Eye Nebula, NGC 3242 in Hydra. Another object that was discovered by William Herschel, that was in 1785. Now, English astronomer William Henry Smith, that's that admiral I told you about, noted in his observations that its apparent size was similar to Jupiter, which is how he acquired the name Ghost of Jupiter. Reverend Thomas William Webb, another famous English astronomer, also described it that way in his Celestial Objects for Common Telescopes in 1873. It's also known as the diamond. You can see the diamond shape there, and the cat's eyes, what American astronomer Tom Lawrenson calls it. So for this one, we're looking at the constellation Hydra, pretty much in the middle of the constellation, just below the star in that bend there. That's where you're going to find it. This is called the Eye of God. This is one that was discovered by William Herschel in 1785, NGC 1232 in Eridanus. I don't know who came up with this name yet. I'm still looking through observing records to find this. It wasn't William, so far as I can tell. But that's a beautiful face-on spiral galaxy with another smaller galaxy off to one side, well worth looking for. So there's Eridanus again. We were looking at this part of the sky a moment ago, but if in this curve over here, that's where you're going to find that one. This is called the Eye of Medusa, or the Medusa Merger, or the Medusa Galaxy. This is in Ursa Major. You can easily see why it has any of those names. This was discovered by William Herschel in 1791. Again, not sure who came up with the name first, working on that, but it's well worth checking out. There's Ursa Major. You see the dipper there, and you see right behind the bucket right there. That's where that one is situated. This is called the flying eye by some people, and I can see that, but it's also known as Thor's helmet, the fan, the bust silhouette, the duck head, the duck, and the Whistle Nebula. This is another one of Herschel's discoveries, 1785. This is in Canis Major. It's a H2 region, NGC 2359. I think Thor's helmet is the best name for this. That's what immediately jumps out at me, and probably because I'm big, but you know, like they're all good names. And if you're looking for that, you see Canis Major at the bottom there, you see Monoceros just above and right in between them. That's where you're going to find that. This is the glowing eye. It's also known as the dandelion puffball. This is NGC 6751 in Aquila. It was discovered by German astronomer Albert Meth in 1863. And if you're looking at Aquila, right off one end of it, that's where that is located. This is the golden eye, Messier 67. This is in the constellation Cancer. It was discovered by German astronomer Johann Gottfried Kohler in 1779. It's also known as the Pac-Man. I think you can easily see if you ever played Pac-Man why it would be called that. And the King Cobra cluster, beautiful open cluster there. This is located in between Hydra and Cancer, right about there. This is a bullseye. Now, this is a really dense field of stars, but right in the middle of this, you can see, this is in Scutum, so we're in the Milky Way here. American astronomer Wayne Schmidt, who's one of our favorite contributors for asterisms, he's good at coming up with names for things, describes it as a 40 arc-minute diameter bullseye right in the middle there, but it's also known as the fish hook. Now, other astronomers will notice that it's got a kind of a hook shape that goes up to a bright star towards the top there. This is also located near Aquila, right in close to the N star and the shield Scutum there. This is the camel's eye, NGC 1501. This is in Ophiuchus, another one of William Herschel's discoveries. This is in 1787. It's also known as the oyster. You can easily see why it's called that. An American astronomer, Francis G. Pease, who was with us between 1881 and 1938, described it as convolutions of the brain. And I can see that too. It's quite a distinctive nebula. So here's Camelot Pardalis. That's that triangle but there, and just along one side of it, that's where you're going to find it. This is the cat's eye. Another one of William Herschel's entries in the NGC from 1786. This is in the constellation Draco, NGC 6543. It's also known as the snail. You need to see how you could get that name. And the sunflower. And that, if you're looking at Draco, which is situated between Ursa Minor and Hercules there, in the curve, right in the middle, that's where you're going to find it. This is the crocodile's eye, or the croc's eye. This was discovered by French astronomer Pierre Méchain, who is one of the assistants for Messier, Charles Messier, back in the day. This is number 94 on Messier's list. It's in Canis Venatici. Not sure who came up with the name crocodile yet, working on that. But if you find those two major stars that form that line, which is Canis Venatici, it's over here in between Ursa Major and that constellation. This is the tiger's eye, NGC 2841. This is in Ursa Major, another one of Herschel's conquests, 1788. You can see it just off center there, sort of tipped sideways. If you're looking for that one, you go up to Ursa Major, right between the front legs there, right in that narrow triangle is where you're going to find that. This is Cleopatra's eye. It's also known as a jellyfish. You see why it could be called that. It's also known as the ghost of Neptune. I'll get back to that. NGC 1535 in the constellation Eridanus, the river. Another one William Herschel found, 1785. And it got this name because at high magnification, it appears as a slightly out of focus blue-green object, and it resembles the planet Neptune because it's a similar color. If you've ever seen Neptune in the eyepiece, you'll recognize that this is the color that it would be. So if you're looking for that, here we are back in the region of Eridanus again. right there in the middle of all that winding river. There's another Cleopatra's Eye. Now we're going to get into asterisms here. This is German astronomers Christopher Hay and René Merting from Dusseldorf. And you'll find this on Robert Sabal's Faint Fuzzies website, which is an excellent source of pictures and information on asterisms. Is number 8 on their list. And you can see the line of stars there goes along. That is the eyebrow. And the pupil is the open cluster Messier 25. So all you have to do is find Messier 25 and then sort of back out a little bit with your magnification in Sagittarius, and you'll be able to find that. So there's Scutum, the shield. There's Teapot of Sagittarius, and it's located right there in between them. Now,
so that's a binoculars one, huh?
That's a binoculars one, yeah. Now, there's a bunch of eyes of Sauron up there. Don't know whether we have any Lord of the Rings fans here. J.R.R. Tolkien, I'm certainly one of his fans. But these aren't ones that he created. Just to be clear, we do have asterisms that he did create in our list. But people who are fans of that and The Hobbit and so on have given this name to several objects up there. One of them is NGC 7293 in Aquarius. This was originally discovered by a German astronomer, Carl Ludwig Harding, before 1824. It's also called the Helix. You can see the helix shape there. It is another one of these things. It's called the Eye of God. It's a sunflower, and there are variations on the Helix name.
It's a highly underrated one.
It's a highly underrated one.
It's a fantastic object. It's big. It's huge.
It's huge. If you're looking for that, there's Aquarius, and there's Piscis Austrinus, and right in between them there, that's what you're going to find. Another Eye of Sauron is the planetary nebula M142, and that is located just below the handle of the teapot in Sagittarius, right here. That's a telescopic one, that one. And the last one is NGC 4151 in Canes Venatici, which was discovered by William Herschel in 1787. And you can see the faint extended arms there spiraling around it, and the shape in the middle there that makes it look like an eye. If you're looking for that one, so here you have Coma Berenice and Canes Venatici, and you can see the Dipper, the Big Dipper. It's located right in the middle there. Now, I'm going to back out a little bit, start looking at faces in the sky, and I have to tell you, this is my very favorite one up there. This again is Christopher Hay and Ray Merting, our German friends. Number 7 on their list. It's in Vulpecula. And if you're looking at this group of stars here, if you know what to look at, it's right here. I'm going to show you another rendering of this so it's a little clearer. This is their sketch of it here. So you can see there's 2 closed eyes. There's a little birthmark on the face. There's a wisp of hair there. It's kind of a side profile of the face. I love that one. If you're looking for this, go find the Northern Cross, find Cygnus right off the end of Vulpecula there. That's where that group of stars is. You can do that with binoculars. Now, Jeffrey Corder, I mentioned him earlier. I was looking for one of his groups of stars, and this is one from his list. He calls it the outline face. And it's located right next to the constellation Lynx. This is 1752 on his list. There's the outline of the face right there. And if you're looking for that, there's Lynx. It's that right next to that bend. Quite easy to find. Gabor Santa, he has a wonderful site with all of his Hungarian astronomical colleagues recording their asterisms, and this is his face. This is 215 on his list. This is in the constellation Monoceros. So if you're looking at Monoceros in between Canis Minor, Procyon there, Monoceros, that's where you're going to find that one. This one is called the Queen's Reflection. This is the open cluster Calinder 463. Wasn't Per Calinder that named it. It's in Cassiopeia. And I have discovered that the reason it's called this is it's got a roughly W shape, which is aligned with the constellation Cassiopeia, which is right next to it, as if it was a reflection. Now, I haven't yet tracked down the exact person that came up with that observation. We're working on it, but that's how that one works. So if you're looking at Cassiopeia, Camelopardalis, Cepheus here, right in the middle, that's where that one, the reflection of the Queen, is located. This one is fun. This is German astronomer Katharina Zürn. This is an NGC 869, which is, of course, one of the two parts of the double cluster. So if you can find a double cluster with your binoculars, you're going to need a telescope to find this because it's in the middle of 869 in Perseus, and it's right there. You see the laughing Cyclops? So of course the double cluster is located here between Perseus and Cassiopeia. Now you can't have a laughing one and not have a glum Cyclops. Robert Zabal, who I mentioned has this Faint Fuzzies website, went out and found the glum one. This is NGC 7134 in Capricornus. It's also known as the howling Cyclops. And if you're looking for that, there's Capricorn on the bottom, Aquarius just above it, and in there in between, that's where the glum Cyclops is. This is called Voltus Irisuri, which is Latin. It means looking ironically, and it was created by South African astronomer Demelza Ramakers, and one of the contributors to our list. This is in 2011 in the constellation Cygnus. And if you look, you can see it's kind of tipped over on its side here, but the eyes are in the lower right, and the curve of stars goes across as the smiling face. And if you're looking for that, there's Cygnus, and just off that wing there, that's where you're going to find Voltus Irisuri. Cheshire Cat, this is also known as Carol Smiley. This is an Auriga. If you're looking at that group of dense group of stars there, you can see that towards the upper left, there are two stars that are the eyes, and there is a curve of stars down to just below center, which is the mouth. Now, I don't know who Carol is, and I don't know who came up with the name of this. That's one of my detective jobs that I'm working on. But as you can see from this here, this is a binocular object, quite easy to see. It's right here located inside the ring of Auriga there. This is the clown face, NGC 2392 in the constellation Gemini. This is another one of those objects discovered by William Herschel. It's also more recently, people are starting to call it the Parka. Now, if you've been around for a while and you've been observing for a while, you're going to say, well, hang on a second, that's the Eskimo Nebula. We're trying to get away from calling it that because it turns out that's an exonym that is offensive to the Inuit. So we're not going to use that name anymore if we can, but it's quite easy to find, the Parka, or it's right next to the twins, right off the hip of Pollux, right there. This is the Fox face, NGC 1788 Orion, another one of Herschel's objects from 1786, also known as the Cosmic Bat. And if you're looking at Orion, and it's right in there, just sort of off to one side above the end, the bend in Eridanus there. Now there's a couple of skulls up there. This one is NGC 246, which is Caldwell 56 on Sir Patrick Moore's list. This is in Cetus. William Herschel spotted it in 1785. It's also known as a soap bubble. Easy to see why you call it that. And the voodoo mask. And if you're looking for the skull or the voodoo mask, there's Cetus, the whale, and right in there, in that bend there, that's where you're going to find it.
Looks like the whale's egg.
Yes, it could be the whale's egg. That's a good name for it. Another skull is Messier 37. This is on Charles Messier's list, but it was Italian astronomer Giovanni Battista Hodierna who first recorded this. It's an Auriga. It's also known as a diamond starburst. Easy to see how it got that. And the cartwheel. I personally like the cartwheel name myself. I see that before I see the skull, but it's well worth looking for. There's that big loop that's Auriga, and it's just off to one side there towards Gemini. Another one is NGC 2224. This is Caldwell 50, and NGC 2238. So you have a star cluster and you have an H2 region. This is in Monoceros. German astronomer Albert Marth found this, also known as the Rosette. If you look right in the middle there, I know you can't use a version for a slide, but you'll see that there is a nebulosity there, and that is where that is located. If you're looking at Gemini and Orion, it's below Pollux's feet, beside Orion's arm. This is the skull and crossbones. This is NGC 2467 in Puppis. And it was William Herschel in 1784 that spotted this. Back then it wasn't Puppis, it was the Argo ship. Also known as a chained brooch that refers specifically to the stars there. And if you're looking for this, there is that shape of Puppis, the poop deck of the ship, Argo, and it's right there at the end. So if you want to check these out for yourself and all those other stars that I told you are eyes that I haven't got time to tell you about, there's a link here. You can go to the RASC website and search for the World Asteroisms Project. But you know what? Now, 2 years in, if you go to Google, put in World Asteroisms Project, enter, it'll be the first hit. You'll be able to find it easily, and they're free downloads. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
Didn't see any
Thank
so
you, Chris,
far.
has put the link in there for me.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? I was just gonna ask you about one of them. Oh, oh, it'll come back to me. I was thinking, if you like, we can actually dynamically, interactively zoom in on some of these.
Sure.
And see where they are in the sky. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen here. Bring up my stellarium, and we can. I'm intrigued by the ones that are binocular size. So I'm going to actually bring up a binoculars ring here. And we can kind of zoom in on some of these. And what I'll do is I go back. Let's go back to the one, the Carol Smile here. And go into the wintertime. All right. There we go. My stellarium a chance to catch up. So there you are right there, right? It's the,
yeah.
She's almost like got a gold tooth or something.
Yeah, it certainly does look that way, doesn't it? But that's an easy one to see in binoculars. It stands out quite nicely.
Yeah, somebody remarked that you went too fast, but we're recording it, so we're fine. All right, so what was a couple others that were fun? Where was the child, the sleeping child?
The sleeping child, child's dreaming face, I should say, is in Vulpecula.
Vulpecula.
Yeah.
Right, let's find the one.
It's right next to 15 Vulpeculae.
Okay, let's do that. And by the way, if anybody else has any.
Oh, yes, do share.
Then please share.
We definitely want you to share these.
Okay. So, I'm not sure where.
So you can see over there, it says 39 Cygni. That is the end of that little scoop of hair in the face. And you can see,
oh, I see. Okay.
Zoom in, there's two sets of 3 stars, which are the closed eyes. Yeah, there you go. And yeah, there's that row of stars going over towards 21 Vulpeculae. That's the side of the face.
Okay. This looks like the pillow.
Yeah, it does kind
of. Let's see, what average aperture is useful for these so far? So the beautiful thing about asterisms is that you don't need a big telescope at all.
That's it.
So absolutely any size telescope should work.
And but we are recording this and putting it on YouTube a little later. So if you want to review this, no problem. It'll be there for you.
And of course, you know, not on the eye topic, but, you know, one of the all-time favorites is the coat hanger. You're in the same neighborhood.
Oh, yes. That one actually is listed on our list as a unaided eye object because the first person to record that was Abdel Rahman Al-Sufi in 936, and he didn't have a telescope. And you could definitely do this with binoculars, I assure you, you know. But yeah, it's like the beehive, Messier 44, another object that's all over ancient skies. Everybody has got it, and it tends to be recorded as a telescopic asterism now, but actually, you can see it quite easily. Oh, you're going to look for the
Cyclops, right?
Cyclops. Okay, it's an 869.
Okay, so that would be, I don't know if it's this one. No.
There it is. Oh, you just had it. Zoom in.
Where am I? Where am I?
Oh, yes. Look at 61 Andromeda there.
Yeah.
Right next to it. Zoom in. There you go. You got the right next to the 61 Andromeda, you got the eye, and then there's the face in there.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to visit that one some clear night. Try that one. That's a nice one. Think of another one while we're here. Just got a few minutes to well, we've got plenty of time, so we'll have a little fun looking at some of these.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, I was going to ask the audience's opinion on something here. So at the David Dunlap Observatory, we have the big 1.88 meter telescope, but the field of view is so tiny, so we often struggle as to what to put in the telescope, but we can show people reasonably through the eyepiece.
Right.
And what we came across recently that we hadn't been using before is part of the Pleiades.
Oh yeah.
So let me just zoom in on here. And one of the things that really nicely fits in the big telescope is Alcyone. And I'm just going to turn off the image here. This little pattern here. And actually, if I bring the, I'm just going to bring the star bloat down a little bit here. There we go. Let's do that. We get this neat little pattern of a little triangle and then the much brighter star beside it. So I'm wondering, what should we call that? There's got to be a name we can call it.
Well, there is already one asterism. If you back out just a little bit, bring that bloat back and back out a little bit, you can see that Alcyone is at one end of a stream of stars that goes down to the left there. And that's called Alley's braid. Alley, of course, is Alcyone. Okay. So that's one that's been around for a while. And then a little bit further over to the other side, there's a candy cane as well. But I don't believe anybody has come up with an asterism, just a name for that particular asterism. So maybe that's a challenge that we should throw out to the audience there. Let's give us a name. Someone in the audience has said, what about the trapezium in Orion? Yes, absolutely. That is a telescopic asteroid. It is very well known and goes back a very long way.
For the Alcyone, I want to say something like, the juggler. Where Alcyone is the character in the little triangle of the three balls. So that's my proposal, the juggler.
It was actually, I just finished showing you all of these different things that were discovered by Herschel but not named by him. Trapezium, that was named by Herschel.
Yeah, let's go in and show everybody the trapezium. Sure. And there was a question on the Q&A about stellarium settings that I'll answer here in a second.
Okay.
So, and by the way, when you're using stellarium, by default, the slides showing the deep sky images is in effect. And you may find from time to time that you want to actually switch those off, just so you can more easily see the asterisms inside a nebula. So there's the trapezium. Okay. And if I don't think I can get the two additional stars to show up in this current view, but that's where that is. So I'll answer the question. Well, folks, 10-pin alley, somebody asked about. I'm not aware of that.
I am not aware of a 10-pin alley asterism. If you've got one, tell us where it is.
Okay, so I'm actually going to use the question is asked about the Digital Sky Survey option in Stellarium. And what you'll find, and which I'll be mentioning here in a few minutes when I talk about the finest NGCs, is that not every object in the Stellarium has a photograph for it. And so what I often use is this button called DSS. And so you want to do this, you want to use this while you're zoomed in. So for example, if I go in here to Orion, this slide that you're seeing, this color slide of the nebula, it could be from Adam Block. I mean, Adam Block is a common contributor to the DSO's, Deep Sky Images in Stellarium. It might be one of his. But if you disable that one and bring up the DSS button, you'll see that the software is going off and grabbing an alternate image of the whole sky. And it's a mosaic, so you will see flaws in it. So don't be alarmed by that. You will see some boundaries and things where things are stitched together. But kind of the more you wait, the more details will appear. So that's an example of the DSS image of Orion's sword as opposed to the photograph that was in there. And yeah, you can zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. This is a really great way of seeing some very faint things.
I noticed, Chris, that there's a question in the question and answers from James Fast. Says, I've been trying to activate the Deep Sky Survey, DSS colored in Stellarium, running version 23.1, have enabled DSS colored survey, but cannot find the tray icon to enable.
Yes. So what you need to do is you need to go down to your configuration window F2. You need to go to your, I believe it's the tools. May not be tools, it may be extras, no? Yes.
Extras, I think, yeah.
Under extras, you want to make sure you've got DSS survey check mark. And you may need to restart the software, but when you do, they'll have a button for it now on your horizontal bar.
Oh, okay. Now I've got Dave telling us that 10 Pin Alley is the name he would like for our Alcyone.
Oh, okay.
Let's go back and look at that.
A bowling analogy. Okay. All right. 10 Pin Alley.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I suppose
we could do that.
That's what we're here for. The hive mind. Yeah. Nice.
Dave, give us your last name so we can credit you for that. We're not gonna put it on the list without the name of the person.
We need to share it. We'll share the glory. Yeah, cool. That's nice. Yeah, that's a really great source of them, right? Is to pick an open cluster or something like this and start poking around inside it and see what you can find.
Absolutely.
Right. All right, let's go back to tonight's sky then, and we'll see where we're at here. 6, 7, 6. So yeah, I'm not sure what else we could suggest for folks in the way of asterisms. Obviously, we've got the Stargate. We've talked about that in the past. That's down here. That's an
oh yeah, I mean there are as I said, over 2,600 now on the list. You take any night at any time of the year, you're going to find a whole bunch of them up there. We haven't separated it out as a separate observing list. All of the telescopic asterisms in the list are bolded, so they stand out next to all the others. But if you really want one, I have one. Get a hold of me and I'll share a spreadsheet with you that's got just the telescopic ones.
And there's a nice book. I think we've mentioned Damola's book before, right?
Yeah, there are all kinds of excellent books out there. Tom Lorson, Chirval wrote, Magnus Stryker. There are all kinds of people who have got wonderful books out there talking about their favorite asterisms. You can find them all on Amazon, but they're all on this list as well. So yeah, there is a Deep Sky database that is run by Ake Slotograph and the South African crew. It's called DOC in capitals, DB in small case. And on there, you can search the entire sky. You can look at you can look up any of the NGC Messier, any of the objects whatsoever, Caldwell, whatever you like. It'll give you not only the history of it, but it has all of the observing records that they have found around the world and their own. People sign in and just update it with their own observing stuff. So it's a great place to go and get an idea of what other people saw, how they saw it, what they used to see it, what kind of telescope they were using. And sometimes you find Magda Straker's in there all the time going, you know what? I just got a name for that. You know, and so that's fun. You should check. I'll grab the link and I'll put it in the chat there.
Very good. And with that, I think once you've got that, then I think I'll move on to the finest NGCs.
Absolutely.
Once you've posted that. And I'll say thank you, Charles, for taking the wheel. I much appreciate it. That's
oh yeah, no problem. My pleasure. Okay, here we go.
DocDB.net. Fantastic. All right. Let's pop into the finest NGCs. Let's put this over here so I can see my notes. There's my all right, very good. So, as I've been saying for the past while, we've been running through the plethora of spring finest NGCs objects on Alan Dyer's list, which appears in the Observer's Handbook every year. And there's some real gems in there. I mean, some of them are brighter than some of the Messier objects, so it's really worth a look at them. And I'm going to actually highlight some that I'm going to refer to as kind of showpieces, which I think are particularly good to look at. Because there are so many to get through in the spring sky, I'm not doing them in any kind of particular order, but I have picked a group of a set of them for this session, which are kind of in a related patch of the sky, so they'd be all right. So we're looking at least in the latitude of Toronto, you know, we're looking at the end of astronomical twilight at 11:15 p.m. So that's dark. That's late for it to get dark, but hopefully folks are able to kind of catch a nap and get up late and look at some of these great objects in the sky. The other thing is that because we're dealing with springtime objects technically, but because if you pick ones that are northerly, have a northerly declination, then they tend to remain perched on high a little bit deeper into the season. So even though we're getting towards the end of spring, a number of these are still definitely observable after dusk once it gets dark in the evening sky during this time of June. So first up, I'm going to actually highlight this group here. I'm going to show you where they kind of all are to start with. So we're looking at a group of objects that are kind of on the meridian. You like to choose things while they're relatively close to the meridian, because that way they're going to be higher in the sky and then more easily seen through Earth's blanket of atmosphere. And, you know, even though it's not technically fully dark until about 11:15, I mean, you can start looking at these objects, perhaps some of them as early as around 10:30, and maybe even a bit later, though, if you're living in a more northerly city. But certainly this time of the night is certainly fine. First up, I'm going to mention one of these showpiece objects, and I'm going to actually direct you to this one earlier in the evening. So right as soon as it's astronomical twilight's done. That's NGC 5746, which is also known as the Blade and Pearl or Sombrero Galaxy. That's this one right here. And what I love about this one, and I've written about this in Sky News before, is that it's so easy to find. So it's a great galaxy. There is no picture for it in Stellarium at the moment. So you will need to activate your DSS option to pick it up. And there you go. Look at that fantastic kind of flying saucer shape. So it's Stephen O'Meara, the American author Stephen O'Meara, who actually coined the notion of the blade and pearl. He's talking about the core of the galaxy being kind of stellar, and he's imagining it as a pearl balanced on the blade of a sword or the blade of a knife. So that's where he gets it from. Also called the mini sombrero, because it does resemble the Sombrero Galaxy. So it's an intermediate spiral. It's bright enough to see with, say, 4-inch or larger aperture telescopes, discovered by William Herschel back on February 24th of 1786. number 126 of his class 1 objects. And look, it's just 20 arc minutes due west of the star 109 Virginis. So I'm going to turn off this and wind back out so you can see what I'm talking about. So here we've got Leo and Denebula. We've got the bright star Arcturus. We've got the figure of Virgo the Maiden beneath her, and her more northerly foot star is 109 Virginis. And once you've got that, you'll find that these are actually, let me turn this back on, depending on the telescope and the eyepiece combination used, they'll share the field of view. So this is a simulated view of a 6-inch Dobsonian telescope using, and let me just put on the 26 millimeter colossal. So that's about a 35 power field of view, about a 1.5 degree field of view. And you can see you're going to have that bright star in the field kind of interfering with the dimmer galaxy. So what we recommend, of course, is that once you've got the field located, going up and choose a higher power so that you're able to hide the bright star outside of the field of view. So once you've got this view, you want to use your averted vision, try some various magnifications. You can look for the galaxy's shape, its orientation, see if you can see the pearl in the blade, that sort of thing. Describe the core and the halo characteristics. Look for these field stars. There's some neat field stars, beneath it. And if you've got a larger aperture telescope, then you have a hope of extending, the range or the length of the blade, so to speak. Also, you want to look for another galaxy in the neighborhood. Let me just wind back a little bit. Go to the previous ocular. There's actually a little galaxy here, NGC 5740, a little spiral galaxy. So they all three share the field of view, but you want to hide the star out of the field. So that's the NGC 5746. All right, next up, turn off these to declutter a little bit. Now we're going to go a little bit more north, and we're going to venture into Canis Venatici, as Charles already visited here a little bit ago. But we're gonna make our way up there, and our next stop is going to be NGC 5466. This is a globular cluster, so yay, we're finally into something other than galaxies in the springtime sky. We've got a globular cluster, 5466. This is nicknamed the snow globe cluster or the ghost globular cluster. It's class 12, so it's quite sparse. So it's got a very low density profile. There you can see a sense of it here. So it almost resembles more an open star cluster than a globular cluster. And what's neat about this one is that there's evidence to suggest that it may have plunged through the plane of our Milky Way galaxy within about 50 million years ago. So that's a neat thing to think about when you're looking at this one. Because it's so sparse, it's not particularly bright, so it's going to be one that's better suited for a larger aperture telescope, perhaps a 6-inch or larger aperture telescope. Discovered by William Herschel back on May 17th of 1784, number 9 in his class 6 objects. And to find it, you can form an isosceles triangle. Let's see if I can find this. Wind back so you can see a little bit better. Isosceles triangle northwest of Arcturus and Izar. So you can see here we've got Arcturus, the bright star. We've got Izar, the nice double, and it more or less would sit at the vertex of an equal triangle with those two bright stars. The way I found it was another way you can do it is you can connect the line from Vindiamatrix, which is this one, and I connected that up to Neckar, which is at the peak of the Kite and Boötes. So it's kind of on that line, but not in the center of that line. It favors the northerly end of that line. The way I found it was I started at the star Rho and I star hopped following patterns around to the globular cluster. So this one, if I put it in the simulated eyepiece view, you can see here that's the view at around 65x. You want to don't over magnify the object. If you over magnify it, you could make it so sparse that it's going to be harder to see it. 65 to 100 power seems to be pretty ideal, maybe even 150, depending on conditions. Averted vision will help. and you want to describe its density profile, see if you notice any various star colors within it or star patterns or little asterisms inside it. Any of that helps to log that. That's about 52,000 light years away from us. All right, now we're going to head into the hunting dogs. And so you've got your two prime, markers is your double star Cor Caroli and your other star Chara. So first up, I'm going to take us to Caldwell 29. So there's a 2-for-1 here. You've got two of the finest NGCs, both occupying the same field of view. They're about 3.5 degrees to the sort of east-southeast of Cor Caroli, but on a June evening, you're going to be looking to the upper left of that star. You can also, if you want, try to just sort of take the line from Chara to Cor Caroli and go about 2/3 of that distance, and then nudge your way up a little bit to find that as well. Now, let's zoom in on it. 29. Here we go. So 29 is another one of these showpieces. It's a nice, tightly wound oval. The density of this galaxy actually makes it observable potentially in big binoculars if you've got a dark sky. Stephen O'Meara, who has superhuman eyes, says that he saw it in a 10x50 pair of binoculars. Let us know if you can. Definitely any size of a telescope should be able to show it to you. Discovered by William Herschel back on May 1st, 1785, number 96 of his class 1 objects. And as I said, it's pretty easy to find by using the 2 stars in Canis Venatici. If I bring up the field of view here, I'm going to just give you back the full sort of 1.5 degree view. So there's both of these 2 galaxies occupying the same field, and this magnitude 6.5 field star as well. So this can help you confirm you're in the right spot. So this is one you're going to, again, try to use your averted vision on. It's going to, you're going to be able to describe its shape, its orientation. And if you've got a bigger telescope, you might even be able to start teasing out some internal structure. It's not just a uniform, oval. You might even be able to see some hints of these dark lanes as well inside of it. All right. This one's about 50 million light years away. So now, NGC 5033 is another one of these neat treats. This is nicknamed the water bug galaxy. And you can sort of see why. It's got this neat kind of arms that extend out. Obviously, the core, as you can see, is very bright. So the core is quite accessible in small aperture telescopes and even potentially also in binoculars. So you might be able to get those 2 little fuzzy patches at the same time in your 10x50 binoculars from a very dark site. If you've got a larger aperture telescope, you can start to tease out, the little knots, concentration knots of star formation in the arms, and maybe even start tracing out some of these arcs if you've got good sky conditions and a big aperture telescope. Again, that's another one that averted vision is going to help for as well. And then at the other end of Canis Venatici, we've got the Box galaxy, Caldwell 21. And by the way, this one, if you're kind of heading towards it from Chara, you're going to encounter the Cocoon, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. That's the, as Charles mentioned, was the Rhino and Calf galaxy. So if you're sort of star hopping from Chara, you're going to catch the Cocoon along the way here potentially. But you're going to head on to Caldwell 21, or the Box galaxy. This is a small high star forming dwarf galaxy. It a bit resembles the Large Magellanic Cloud in its form. It has a bright rectangular core, and then you've got some sort of tendrils that extend out from there. Again, folks have claimed to have been able to see its fuzzy patch in big binoculars under a dark sky. Really any aperture of quality telescope should be able to pick up at least its core. This one was discovered by William Herschel back on April 27th of 1788, and it's number 213 of his class 1 objects. So I found it by, it's 3 degrees to the northwest of Chara, or about halfway to Messier 106. So if you can find Messier 106, it's about midway between Chara and that galaxy. Well, the other way you can do it is to star hop via the Cocoon Galaxy to this magnitude 6 star 4, Canis Venatici, or Canum Venicatorum, and then do a right angle. It's that same span, but at a right angle. It's kind of to the north from there. So there's a number of different ways of getting to it. Once you've got it, you probably want to use something like, let's go back to it here. There we go. A little bit small for low power, but if you want to crank the magnification up to, say, 150 or 100 to 150 power, then you're going to be able to start to see its shapes. You want to use that averted vision again, look at its orientation, its shape, maybe sketch out or remark on the various little knots of brightness that you can see. Its one's about 13 million light years away. All right. Now we're going to head a little bit north now. We're going to go into the other side of the Dipper's handle. So we're kind of heading towards Polaris area, kind of facing more north instead. NGC 4605 here, also known as the Fabergé egg galaxy or the Frankenstein galaxy. Again, there's no picture in Stellarium, so you need to bring up your DSS button image here. This one reminded me of the Whale galaxy, you know, that sort of oval but not symmetrical end to end. So it's a peculiar dwarf galaxy. It's relatively small in size, but it's got a bright concentration to it, and its edge-on orientation makes it accessible to again, perhaps see in big binoculars and definitely any quality telescope. Discovered by William Herschel back on March 19th of 1790, number 254 of his class 1 objects. It's located near the Dipper's Bowl. So let me just bring the stars back here. So if you find the Big Dipper's Bowl, you can make a triangle above the handle of the Dipper from Megrez and Alioth, and it's about an isosceles triangle distance, you know, towards Polaris. So that's the orientation you're going to be looking for. Also, I believe M40 is on the way. So if you're going to star hop from, say, Megrez, you're going to pass by Messier 40 on your way to that galaxy as well. All right, let's put it in the telescope view here. There we go. There we go. Again, averted vision, you want to use different magnifications to see what sort of details you can pick up. You probably will notice a stellar core, you know, a bright central region, and then various amounts of the halo around that. So different regimes of concentrated light as you head away from the core of the galaxy. That's where also a larger aperture might let you see a bit more of the extent of the galaxy. Once you get there, it's, you know, once you've got the bigger aperture on it and you've got about to this point, you're not going to really see it get any bigger than that. This one's about 18 million light years away. And next up, we're going to venture into Draco, and we're going to revisit something that Charles already mentioned here in a second. First up, we're going to go to NGC 5907, which in Stellarium is labeled as 5906. This is the Splinter or Knife's Edge galaxy. It's another really cool showpiece galaxy. It's a large spiral, almost precisely edge-on with a dust lane. It's best seen, though, in medium-sized and aperture telescopes, so 4 to 6 inch aperture telescope or greater. Discovered by William Herschel back on May 5th of 1788, number 759 of his class 2. Just think about how many of these objects he discovered. These numbers are crazy, 750 in this part of his list. Now, it's labeled NGC 5906 in Stellarium because Lord Rosse, back in the day, he thought that he saw a strip of this galaxy that was on the other side of the dust lane, and so he assigned a second, basically a second feature to it, or second object to it, and that then got sort of folded into Dreyer's finest NGC catalog. And so it ended up with sort of dual name here. It just barely shares the field of view. Let me just bring this up and bring the field of view down to low power here. And I'll bring up, you can see that there's some other, there's Messier 102. So if you're familiar with how to find Messier 102, I think we can just barely get them in the same field of view. Now, where it is exactly is if you face north on a June evening, it's basically located just 2.9 degrees to above or celestial south-southwest of the bright star Edasich, which is Iota Draconis. And you're heading, you want to make sure as you're heading towards Cygnus in Boötes when you're doing that sort of motion. You know, things rotate around the pole, so things can get a little confusing orientation-wise. Another way of finding it is I doubled the span. Just bring up my measuring tool here. I doubled the span from Polaris to the end of its bowl, and that lands you basically in the right spot. So that's from Polaris to Fourcade. We'll get you there as well. So you want to use various magnifications on this one. Let me just bring this up again. Put it in the eyepiece. You're going to be able to see it longer, elongated if you've got a bigger aperture telescope, but you want to describe its shape, its orientation, the profile of its shape. The dust lane could affect the symmetry and the shape that you see, so you want to make a note of that. And there are mentions that you might be able to see some sort of knots of brightness or some variations in the brightness along the plane. So you want to do that. And don't forget Messier 102 while you're in the neighborhood. So this is about 48 million light years away. Next up, we've got the Lost in Space galaxy. So we've got two finest NGCs to mention here in the curl of the neck of the dragon. Again, we're facing north on a June evening. And first one up here is NGC 6503, also known as the Lost in Space galaxy. This one's pretty small, but it's a bright dwarf spiral galaxy. It's got dense, tightly wrapped arms. That's going to make it more easily visible in a smaller aperture telescope. So it's worth giving it a try. It's not a Herschel object, though. It was actually discovered by German astronomer Georg Friedrich Julius Onwer Arthur von Auwers in 1854. He only used a 2.6-inch refractor to find it. So if he can find it, I'm sure anybody else can find it. It's about 38% of the distance from Alcon, which is this star Chi Draconis, towards Aldebaran. I don't have all these pronunciations, Charles. Just help me out if you know a better name. Or Zeta Draconis. So it's about 38% of the distance along it. And what you can use to help you is to pick out these other, magnitude 4.5, 4.75 stars along the way. What I did is I actually I'm just going to do this, Control B. I basically put my Telrad with this Zyban and LD star kind of on the edge of the rings, and then my finder was basically where I needed to be. So you want to use averted vision, you want to note its shape, its size, and any of the field stars that you might see around it. And you might even pick up some internal structure if you've got a bigger aperture telescope. This one's about 20 million light years away. And last up, we've got one that Charles showed a little while ago. That's the Cat's Eye Nebula, also known as the Snail or the Sunflower Nebula. I think we're getting into some multiple namings of some of these objects here because, as you'll see here in a second, we've got some neat internal structures that give it that sort of two snails snuggled together or something like that going on. It's got an inner envelope that's bright, that's more easily to see in a smaller telescope. But if you've got a big aperture telescope, try to check out and see how much of this bigger outer halo that you can recognize. That's going to need a very dark sky and a very big aperture. In fact, one patch of it is bright enough to have earned its own IC catalog number, IC 4677. So don't just stop when you've seen the planetary nebula itself, but check it out and see if you can see any of the little faint patches around it. And where it's located, so just wind back here. Again, it's in that neighborhood where you just were at NGC 6503. So what I said, it's about half a degree south of the midpoint between Altair here and this one. So sort of across the neck, but then you want to head offset about a degree or so off to the side. I also had it noted you could aim your finder midway between the Mag 5 stars LD. Where's that one? This one and this one. So that'll put you right on the line. So you're talking about this magnitude 5 star, 36 Draconis and Omega Draconis on this side here. Definitely try an oxygen 3 filter if you have it. That'll brighten up the planetary nebula with respect to the other stars in the field and help you identify a little bit better. Prepare to use lots of magnification, whatever your sky conditions will permit, because the more you zoom in on it, the more potentially interesting details you're going to pick up inside of it. Let's just look at the DSS image and see what we see. Yeah, it's not as good. So your mileage will vary as according to how much of the detail you can see inside. See if you can see the magnitude 11 central star, and see if you can get the blinking planetary effect to work, where you're sort of using averted vision on the envelope and then direct view of the central star, and you should get a blinking effect going on as well. So that's the list. Hope everybody has some clear skies and good luck and can check out some of these. And if there's any questions, happy to take them.
Wonderful. Don't have any. Well, there is somebody here saying, I think my next star 4SE would be too small for these, but I will try if I'm in the dark sky.
Yeah, actually, that also makes me think of another point, is that don't necessarily judge based on how it looks in your app or in Stellarium, because not the quoted magnitude values in Stellarium, for example, are not always reflective of the true brightness of some of these objects. So if you do look at some other sources, then you can get a better sense of really how achievable it is or how observable it is for you.
Yeah, Charles Messier's original telescope was a 4-inch. And so if you've got a 4-inch, I guarantee your optics are better than what they had back in those days. So you should be able to have no problem with any of the Messier objects, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And also if you're sky, if you can get to a dark sky site and you don't have any smoke bothering you, because smoke will affect it. So if you do have a smoky forecast, don't be surprised if you can't see as well some of these objects, because they will extinct it. They'll be extincted.
Local dust lane.
Yes, yes. Well, that's great. So if there's no further questions, we can knock it off early today and
okay.
and retire. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I'm planning to cover a whole session on star charts, how to use star charts, how to read them, maybe some of the better atlases than others, and some of their pros and cons, and just some advice for using star charts at the telescope eyepiece. So I think that'll be a good one.
I would encourage some of the ethno-astronomers out there to come and take that class, because it's amazing how many errors they make, mistaking gammas for lambdas and this sort of thing when they're trying to use star charts. So that'd be good.
Yeah, it's important to have it right way up.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, all right, everybody. Well, keep looking up, and good luck, and hopefully we can get some fires under control out west and up north, and have a good summer.
Be safe out there.